So I then marked myself, and thank you, Microsoft. There is a way of putting it on this kind of spidery or maple leaf diagram. And they're 50 round here. Naught's pretty rubbish, 10's pretty good. I'm going to talk about some of these. Really, my apologies, Simon, you know, this does rather blow my cover in terms of what you said at the start, you know, which is, you know, it ain't easy, this sort of stuff. So I'm going to talk about that one. Well, I mean, certainly enjoying being CEO and love your industry. I mean, I've loved being in airlines. I love being in retail. The challenge is fantastic. Communication, really feel I could do a lot better on that than I have done. I certainly, and I've got the scars to prove it, haven't paid attention to audit issues as much as I might have done, or has been as integrated with the procurement folks and so forth, and looking after top people's IT and things like that. I think if I can actually work out how to build a website properly, I may stick this up online, so anybody who felt like it could try and mark yourselves. It might be quite fun. I mean, goodness knows whether that's accurate and whether if I gave it to my colleagues who are in this audience, they would mark me the same way. But I think it's just worthwhile testing oneself to see how one does. So, what did I think I did well? Well, I certainly enjoyed being CIO. Fortunately, that's in the present tense. Not being afraid of IT. I think don't talk gobbledygook, but don't be afraid of talking about technology. You know, we are very privileged to be in a place where the world is being transformed by technology. More of that later. You know, it is a fabulous time now. You know, all sorts of things are happening. Whole industries are being changed by technology. And actually, that's, you know, one of the great things we're there for, to talk about it, to communicate it, to explain it, to demystify it. Being a non-exec director, it expands, you know, I certainly do the things that Simon talked about, but they're really useful. So I found that when I was sort of dragged up before the British Airways board, you know, to talk about why we'd had a few bumps in the road when we put in a new reservation system being rather important for an airline, actually I could, because I'd been on a board, I actually had a perspective in terms of how it felt. And it's quite interesting, those of you who are non-exec directors in the audience will know the kind of latent paranoia that being on a board produces, you know, because you only see the executives, you know, 8 times a year or even once a month. You know, they tell you everything's fantastic and it's all going very, very well. And then it doesn't. So, very interesting perspective. Good to broaden your horizons, I think. The industries you're in, as I said, that's fantastic. Cut IT operational costs. That was over 60% in real terms. It's about 50% in cash, but it was very hard work. And I cannot personally claim credit for it. I can absolutely, riding on the shoulders of the operational people in BA who chased every penny over the 10 years I was CIO, and managing supplier relationships. I don't know if there are any suppliers in the room or whether they'd agree, but I think, you know, having a great relationship with suppliers is really key. A bit more of that later. Next, please. So, enjoy being CIO. I said I'd give you some classical references. It's no bed of roses, although this appears to be. This was a Roman emperor called Heliogabalus, who eventually came to believe he was the sun god. Don't do that as CIO. Not good if you think the sun shines. So, in being CIO, enjoy it. You know, it is a fabulous opportunity. You know, whether, you know, IT is fashionable or not at the time, but actually you've got a department that actually looks across the whole range of what your company does. You can actually join up the dots. You can see the very, very big picture. And it's vitally important. I said, look after your home-work-life balance. My wife and daughters are in the audience. And they can confirm that maybe I'm not that good at that. But do try to get it right and keep on trying. As I say, I enjoyed it very much. In British Airways, we had 9/11 strikes, fuel price rise, banking crisis, Icelandic volcanoes, which have come around again. We also had polonium, where, as you may recall, some gentlemen who may or may not have been connected with the Russian state traveled on a BA plane from Moscow to London. And then you could take a Geiger counter on the plane and see where they'd actually been sitting. Fortunately, the half-life is only about 3 or 4 days of that. But, you know, just try predicting that lot on a risk register. So you never know what's coming, you know, what will throw at you. But actually, that's half the challenge. And I'm really having a ball at John Lewis, learning a new industry, learning about retail, very fast moving. So absolutely, you know, do have a ball, do enjoy it. You know, it doesn't mean it's easy, but it's important to enjoy it. Yes, cut IT operations costs. This is a sack of the Rome by vandals in 465 AD. You don't actually have to do it this way or you know, behave like a vandal, but it is important to deal with operational costs. Whoops, back. Thank you. Can you go up one? I think you're going forward. Right. This is interesting, isn't it? Keep going, up. Here we were. Yes, cut IT operations costs. Do try to reduce the year-on-year costs of IT operations each year. You know, the unit costs of technology are going down. There are plenty of outsourcing salespersons that will be telling your CFO that that's the case. There is Moore's law, which we know, you know, depending on what you believe he said first, doubles the power on a transistor every 18 months or 24 months. There is, of course, the Gates law, which means that technology bloats at the same rate and prices stay at the same. But your job, I believe, is to drive the costs down. And you can do this. It's the best answer to the efficiency challenges that you will get. As I say, I was entirely dependent on the hard work and expertise and professionalism of the IT operations people, both in British Airways and John Lewis. But the good news is you can then use the savings to fund IT investment going forward, if that's what the company wants. But if you can demonstrate that year on year, the overall cost of what you do is getting better, even though you're doing more, that is a great way to argue that you need to invest more to save and to increase functionality. And that was really the heart of, as Simon said, what we were trying to do in British Airways. Managing supplier relationships. I rather like this one because you can supply who this is. That's Julius Caesar and that's Vercingetorix, the Gallic leader. And I like to see myself in the role of Julius Caesar and the Oracle salesman in that role or something like that. Sorry, David. Or maybe this one, you know, the bound one. Next, please. Next slide. So I think it's really important that you're responsible for managing the company's overall relationships with the key suppliers. As I said, you know, the key tactic of an outsourcing salesman is to sell around a chief information officer, IT director, and say that, you know, the turkeys are, you know, not going to vote for Christmas, they're in thrall to other suppliers. Be absolutely sure you can rebut those allegations. You know, IT matters to your company. It's so important that it works. Most companies I've ever come across, and most boards, take technology for granted. And it's very, very hard to get this over. You know, however tempting it is to go to the data center and pull the plug out, don't do that. But, you know, if it's running very well, and 99.99% of the time, touch wood, we know it is, then you're taken for granted. So you have to find really some way to do that, and actually managing the supplier relationships about that is important. Final point on that one is, you know, to be really clear where IT should be. And most companies, certainly companies like British Airways, and I think some extent John Lewis as well, you know, have a culture of perfectionism. And it's quite hard to tell a colleague on the board that actually, you know, a finance system that is a commodity is quite good enough. And actually, where we need to differentiate ourselves is on our web page. Sort of sounds quite obvious until you actually have to tell the director face to face. So, you know, being clear where technology sits, whether it's a commodity, fast follower, or leading edge, I think is also really important. Right, now this gets more interesting. What I didn't do so well. I'll talk about some of these. Planning my time. I was trying to do too much, as Simon amply demonstrated. Being human. Talk about that later. Communications. Projecting performance. That's about actually this point I was just talking about getting over. Actually, how difficult getting modern technology in a corporate environment right is. Supporting top people's technology. Come on to that later. Supporting my PA and the core team. Sorry, Sue. And enforcing technical standards and keeping close to procurement. So those were some of the things that when I did my marking, I felt I needed to do better on. I'm just going to talk about a few of those. Planning my time. Here's Archimedes doing it properly. Need to be strategic about this. And I had this rule of thumb when I was at British Airways, spend 20% time, a day a week on average, communicating with people, partners in the IT department. Another day on the management of the department. Another day on strategic programs. So, as I said, you know, one of the big events of any CIO IT director's life is that big cutover. So, really knowing where you are on those big transformational projects and actually spending time not with the of delivery or the big, you know, the guy from IBM or Deloitte who's putting it in, but absolutely talking to your team and actually getting them to a space where they feel confident with you. Because at the end of the day, you know, everybody's going to want to go live with that new project. Some guy down there knows that actually we haven't really tested, you know, that interface properly, or he knows he's getting some, you know, a rather large number of failures, and he doesn't really know what the impact of that is. However, you know, we've said we're going to go live, and we're going for it. You have to be very brave if you're a junior person in a business or IT department to put your hand up and say so. So, you know, you want to know those guys. So, you know, if they've got a real problem, they're going to let you know. They're going to really feel that they can be honest about what the risks are, because you'd much rather know before it goes live than afterwards. Then 10% on the big change programs, and then 10% on whatever else hits you. Now, in any given week, I absolutely never, ever, ever, ever did that. You know, quite a lot of weeks I, you know, felt so tired at the end of them I didn't check back, but sometimes I did. And it actually helps you reset your priorities. And you can change those and move those around as necessary. But really important at least to try and set targets. And I've tried to do that for my new role, and guess what? I'm not sticking to it, but there you go. Yeah, try to be human. This is The Vitruvian Man by Leonardo, very well known. I just wonder who the guy standing behind him was. Anyway,